Hello, I'm Lindley Gooden. Welcome to the third instalment of Future of Utilities, the online series. Great to have you with us wherever you are today. Now, first up this morning, we will have something very special for you. We'll be speaking to a panel of industry titans about pivoting in the face of adversity. We'll get to that in less than 1 minute's time. First, this is our final Thursday together of 3 in the online series. But if it's your first time watching this live, let's quickly show you around Grip, the AI-driven online event platform that you can see that runs content and networking side by side. There are lots of features available to maximize your time with us. You'll be an expert if you joined us before, but here's how it works, just as a recap. Now, firstly, you can obviously explore the event agenda. You can curate your own personal schedule by clicking on the Add to Session button or on the calendar icon too. And you can find your personal schedule under My Schedule, which is on the left-hand bar, including your scheduled meetings. So have a look at that throughout. That'll be really good. Networking is open right now, as it has been every Thursday and Friday. And here's how it works. When you see a person or a company you'd like to talk to, click on the Interested button or click directly on the button that's labeled Meet. And once you've connected, start a chat or have your meeting. And Grip also offers you recommendations. Just head to the Recommended for You section and you'll see people who match the profiles that you're looking for. Or check who's swiped right on you in the Interested in You section, also on the left-hand bar. Very tantalizing, that one. Now, as ever, if you have any questions throughout the day, head to the Future of Utilities hub and send a message using the Message Future of Utilities button. So get in touch with us there if you need to. And of course, look, a huge thank you to all of our sponsors. We really couldn't run these events without you. You've been there with us throughout. And also for you, for watching, it's definitely worth visiting their hubs on the homepage to explore exclusive content, to speak to team members directly, and not to mention lots of goodies, including prize draws and more. So we are 100% live again today, and we really want to hear from you at home throughout the event, during presentations and panels. Send in your questions whenever you have one by using the box to the right of us, and I'll put them to our panelists and speakers during our discussions. Okay, we've got lots to cover, so let's begin with our opening Leaders Forum. Okay, the utilities industry is fighting to keep energy flowing, taps running, but we're clearly facing very new and extremely heightened pressures. The industry needs new strategies for vulnerable customers, for debt solutions, for operational efficiency, right the way over to increased digitization of customer journeys. And of course, in the background, there's always changing regulation, the need for net zero targets, price controls, all of that stuff. So this morning, we'll start with a 40-minute panel session to understand the current thinking of people leading the industry and how we can support the UK through the current crisis and beyond. So let's meet our amazing panelists. First of all, Heidi Mottram. Hello, Heidi.
Good morning.
Lovely to see you there. A very nice looking house you have too, unless that's the office. Heidi is the CEO of Northumbrian Water. Great to have you with us. Next up, we have Michael Lewis. Hello, Michael.
Good morning.
With a map of the UK behind you, I see.
Indeed.
Michael is the CEO of E.ON UK. Basil Scarsella. Hello, Basil.
Morning, all.
Great to have you there. Basil is the CEO of UK Power Networks. John Morea. Hello, John.
Hi.
John is the CEO of SGN. Great to have you there too. And last but not least, we have Steve Morrow. Hello, Steve.
Very good morning to you.
Steve runs the operations for the UK and Ireland at Anaplan. Okay, we have lots and lots to cover, and I'm sure you have your own questions and comments to put to our panel today, so you can send them through, as ever, using the live Q&A field on your screen. We'll get to as many as we can towards the end of our discussion. Okay, lots to get through. So I'm sure you have lots of questions. I want to hear from you. I want to mention that one more time, because without you, we can't drive that last part of the conversation, and that's really important. Okay, let's crack on. First of all, John, what's most surprised you about the way that the industry has responded to the virus this far?
Well, I guess, one thing I would say is we have a common enemy, and that's the virus. And we've also got a common purpose. We've got to keep we've got to keep energy flowing and water flowing. So therefore, we are part of the essential worker community. So one thing I would say is the collaboration between the utilities has been fantastic. We've been working with each other to make sure that any issues we can overcome together. Our trade unions have been really, really positive. We've had regular communication with our trade union every week on COVID and COVID-related issues. Our people, our colleagues have really risen to the challenge. We've got frontline workers that are having to visit houses every day. We've got to make sure they have the correct PPE, and they are doing what they're really good at, which is making sure people are safe. I think I think that I would say collaboration between both governments that we deal with, Scottish and UK government, BEIS, GLA, the other utilities, trade unions, staff, customers have been fantastic. I mean, interestingly enough, we've done we're actually doing surveys at the moment with customers and also our own people about COVID, and it's quite clear that there's still a lot of people there that are concerned. Obviously, on our replacement program, we're visiting every customer that we touch, talking to them about what we need to do, talking to them about the PPE that we'll be wearing when we enter their house, etc. So, there's a lot of communication going on with our own colleagues. We've just done a survey, had about 3,000 responses. And some of the stuff that COVID has forced upon us, which is homework and etc. Some people like it, some people don't. But also, really, really interestingly, is the public transport issue. The people that use public transport to get into the work, only 16% of them are happy to do so at the moment. So we've got some problems and some issues that we need to overcome. But I would say that collaboration between all interested parties has been fantastic.
Yeah, Basil, I mean, John has covered so much of it there. I mean, so many moving parts at the moment. And of course, confidence among the team is so important. That must be something you're looking at as well, Basil.
Lynn, normally I would disagree with most of the things John says, but it's difficult actually. Seriously, it's difficult to disagree with anything he said. But it's interesting, just putting it another sort of a slightly different perspective. I'm sure we spent a lot of time, all of us, on organisational resilience. And the pandemic was always an issue that sits there and you think, it's never going to happen. And on one day, you can't test it. The last time UK Power Networks was really tested in terms of resilience we've had serious storms, etc. But it was 2012 during the Olympic Games. And that was a good test. But having gone through, and we like I say, we spent a lot of time on organisational resilience and then getting tested, I guess, to surprise that as I reflect over the last 3 or 4 months, is that just about everything we measure, which is important from a performance perspective, whether it's safety, whether it's customer service, whether it's reliability of the network, all of those things have improved. If you look back over the 6 months, the first half of 2020, it's the best year UK Power Networks has ever had. And that's credit to, and John's touched on it, it's the people, it's our employees, it's the way the unions have helped us and collaborated in responding, and obviously the regulator in the government. So the biggest surprise, if you had said to me before, now, do you think there's a pandemic coming up? You're going to have 3,000 odd people working from home. You're going to have the Prime Minister writing to all of us saying, please stay home. But you need the other 3,000 employees to come in every day to work. Do you think you're going to have the best half year you've ever had? I probably would have said you're mad, right? But that's the reality. The guys, the employees have delivered. So the biggest surprise, the way we've been able to adapt.
Yeah. Steve, you and the whole team at Anaplan have been doing a lot of work with clients clearly for such a long time. And during this time, you'll have seen some trends coming through, some common issues and possibly some common solutions. Anything surprise you? Anything that you've seen that's been really interesting in this time?
I think just a couple of things to add, and they really complement what's already been said. I think speed and resilience have been really impressive amongst our customers. I think it proves that great people working in great teams for great companies can get stuff done really quickly. I think to Basil's point, if you'd asked him to plan for the change we've just been through, you probably would have spun up a 2 or 3 year change program. and yet we had to do it in 4 days or 3 days or less than that. In Basil's case, an energy distribution has to happen every day. And I think, resilience for me, I'm probably old enough to remember when electricity and stuff wasn't a given that it'd be switched on every single day. And we now just take that and broadband and water absolutely for granted. And the fact we've gone through 3 months of a completely different way of working, and yet certainly in my context, and I'll touch a little wood now, there's been absolutely no interruption to the service level I've had from my utility providers. I'm digital, so I'm going through my digital, phone app. I know what electricity I'm using. Actually, I have recognised my company have transferred some of their costs onto me now, because clearly I'm consuming more power at home than I would have been in the past. But that resilience, I think, has been really, really impressive. So I guess to my fellow panelists, thank you for keeping the lights on for me. It's allowed me to carry on working.
Heidi, thank you very much. What do you think? I mean, we'll keep it brief, but surprises, but also taking it forward. Is it of what we've learned, all the things, the resilience that so many companies have shown? How important is it, and how can you take that forward, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, again, just to agree, collaboration, resilience, amazing stuff from people. Huge thank you. And I think, we're often beaten up as utilities, aren't we? So I think, nobody would ever want us to be self-congratulatory, but I do think we owe a huge debt of gratitude to our people and the way that they've stepped up to the challenge. It's been absolutely brilliant. And I think that's been recognised. To be fair, we've had some great feedback from government, and I'm sure my other colleagues here on the panel this morning likewise. And so that's really good. Yeah. Looking forward, though, Lindley, I guess as you asked, I've got no reason to doubt that resilience won't continue, and the adaptability and flexibility. But one thing I would probably just flag as a note of caution, as a sector where obviously we have the direct interface with the customer through bill paying, is, whilst we have a lot of our economy at the moment being supported by furloughing and various other government support grants, the impact on people's ability to pay has got a bit of a halo around it. And I think that, towards the end of the year when furloughing ceased, we heard some things from the Chancellor last night about additional protections. But I think we all need to be mindful that as the year goes on, this is going to get tougher in terms of people's ability to pay, and how we look after and care for our customers, particularly those people who are the most vulnerable, is going to be very, very important. Then we're going to have to be very, very innovative and work in partnership with government to make sure we get through that okay.
And we'll certainly look at the mechanics of how that can be done as we talk this morning. But Michael, you've waited patiently there for a moment. I mean, surprises, yes. I suppose, following on from what Heidi says as well, there needs to be a lot of real continued effort, which is not easy when you're dealing with that longer term issue. I mean, your team are going to be under pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just worth reiterating just how severe the challenge was. And I think, we all came through it actually very, very well, definitely as a country and indeed as individual utility companies. But, Basil mentioned the resilience planning and all the rest of it. But what was different about this is, we normally plan for an event or, and yes, a pandemic is in there, but what we saw here was every single one of our sites closed down simultaneously, not just those in the UK, but our outsource partners in South Africa, in the Far East. We'd never planned for the entire thing going down. Our entire field force stopped. Strange things, for example, our biomass power plants. Suddenly we use waste wood in a couple. The recycling centres are closed. The waste wood stops coming through. So all sorts of things that you never planned for happened simultaneously in that first week of the crisis. And I think that's when we all actually realised whether our resilience plans were good. And everything, I won't reiterate what people have said in terms of collaboration, flexibility, the speed with which we responded. But I think there's a couple of other things worth highlighting. Number one, and I'm sure it's true in other organisations, was the extent to which we had to delegate decisions down to the front line during the crisis. We obviously had a senior command meeting twice daily, but we put a lot on the shoulders of middle managers and people even further down the line. And it was that ability to delegate and for people to make decisions in real time that really made sure we were able to keep the lights on, to keep things functioning, and to really do the job well. I think the other key thing to say is we got part way through, probably 6 weeks through, where we started talking about crisis as usual. So we basically managed the initial phase, but life still goes on, and it's not just managing operations. You know, we did a deal right at the beginning of COVID where we did a deal with Kraken Technologies to get a new IT platform for our customers. I announced that the very first day of lockdown, the 23rd of March. You might think, well, that doesn't augur well for it. But actually, we've continued with that and actually started to move customers onto that platform in spite of the lockdown. So we found ways around it. So it wasn't just the pure operations, which were handled really, really well, but also all of the longer term development activities, we found a way of dealing with it. So I think that was also a tremendous achievement during this period. But I completely agree with what Heidi said. There's still some very, very big challenges ahead. And yes, we looked after vulnerable customers during the lockdown, and I think we all stepped up to the plate and made sure that everybody was served properly. But there are big challenges with debt coming down the track, and not just with domestic customers, obviously with furlough coming to an end and so on and so forth, but also with business customers, because you know, electricity demand has fallen and gas enormously during the lockdown, mainly, you know, slightly increase in domestic consumption, but a very big fall in business consumption. And that reflects clearly a large number of businesses have simply stopped functioning. But there is a problem now of a bow wave of debt building up, and we have to figure out how to deal with that, because that could be potentially an enormous number. And we need to work with government and with regulators and indeed with individual customers to solve that problem.
Yeah, so many huge concerns, huge issues thrown up already this morning. We'll keep on going. We'll keep on moving through. Let's try to make try to look at the immediate future, and then we'll look longer term. Clearly, we'll talk about your teams as well, because that's been these are the foundations of the business going forward. But Heidi, let's talk priorities for a second. Michael and Basil talked about the speed of change. There's been so much change and so quickly, and it's accelerated so much. How have your priorities had to change, and have they had to change really, really quickly? Or have you managed to retain the sort of the strategies that you already had in place?
Well, I think that you wouldn't be surprised to hear me say that our customers have always been our priority. And right the way through this process, our customers have remained the priority, and also making sure that our people were safe and able to provide the service that they need to provide to our customers. So in terms of what really drives us as a company, nothing has changed.
Right.
Everybody recognises that what we do, you know, water is an essential public service, wastewater is an essential service to the environment. So we knew that we had to step up to the mark and keep that going. So absolutely no change in our priorities. And I think, you know, like the other panelists have said, just being blown away by the way our people, struck really by Michael's comment and, you know, about middle managers just getting in there and getting on with it and making the decisions that they need to make. We've been able to do a really good job. So, you know, from a customer perspective, we've changed a number of the things that the way that we work, is clearly going into customers' homes was not going to be possible. So some of the things that we do on a daily basis stopped pretty much immediately. Taking samples from customers' taps or reading meters was something that the industry ceased doing pretty much on day one. Yeah. But still things happen inside customers' homes. And one of the things that we've been doing with some degree of really good success actually was using video technology to do virtual visits with customers for quite a while, triaging what the issue was. We have technicians in our contact centre who are there to talk to them, talk through what things are going on, so that we could potentially plan jobs better, get the right materials to the site. But on occasion, customers are also capable of being able to solve their own problems. And that was something that was part of our customer service toolbox before the pandemic struck. But, you know, has clearly just massively come into its own during this process with a really big ramp up and customers really, getting comfortable with that form of technology and being very happy. And of course, it's a great customer service as well, because quite a number of their problems have been solved quicker than they probably would do if they were waiting for one of our technicians to come and serve them. So I would say that, things like that, different changes there. Certainly we had to make changes in the way that we worked from a safety perspective. We were way ahead of the government on that. I've got to say, we had COVID-related different ways of working 6 weeks before the lockdown, actually. So we had already instituted the virtual handovers, social distancing on our production sites, and already had quite a lot of the pre-planning and procurement of things for our field workers as well. But then it operated and we learned. So we've issued, I think, around about 16, 17 new toolbox talks through the pandemic, as we've learned different things and better ways of working and ways of getting information out. We have a safety app that we can get information to our people quickly with, and they can also do dynamic risk assessments and send us information back. So, and our safety record, it was interesting that Basil said he'd had the best year ever. And if you'd have ever thought that that was going to be the case, he would have thought you were mad. But this has been the case because, people have just been absolutely brilliant and stepped in there. So I would say all of those things. Probably the last priority, which has been a bit of a byproduct, is we did make a decision that we weren't going to furlough any of our staff. The biggest group of people that we found didn't have something that they could usefully do is what I just told you about a minute ago, was meter readers, and we weren't going into customers' homes. But a significant number of those people stepped forward to say that they were up for being retrained to do other things, to give us additional resilience. So we now probably have the most multitasking group of meter readers in the industry. I've got people now who can run water treatment works and some of our sewage treatment works. So people have got involved in that. We've had people who are working in charity, going out there and helping people with delivering drugs, delivering food, helping. We work with a whole range of charities normally. So we've helped usually there. And we've been delivering water, bottled water, to hospitals as well, because one of the things that we found, particularly when the weather was very hot, with the additional PPE, keeping our health service colleagues hydrated became critically important. So delivering water to them so that they could keep hydrated on the move. So bit of flexibility, a few different things, and changing the way we work.
That's interesting, Heidi. There's so much going on, and normally I'd be jumping in and asking other people the same thing, but it's just there's so much work that's been done, and right down to the nitty gritty. It's interesting. When we think about priorities, potentially what we think about is you talked about the priority hasn't changed at all. The customers were always the priority. And I think most people can identify with that, but actually then all those minuscule and macro priorities are really important. Michael, in brief, if you can, what about you? Have you seen the priorities change? Or again, can you, do you echo Heidi's points that, yes, you deal with all the operational intricacies, you have to, and the team step in to do that. But in terms of priorities, I guess you at least had to re-examine your priorities, didn't you?
Yeah, I think generally, though, it was mainly in the early part, and the key at the start was to look after vulnerable customers. That's always a priority. There was just a heightened priority on that group of customers, and I think that was true throughout the crisis, because we wanted to make sure, above all else, that nobody self-disconnected or was off supply for other reasons. So it was that emergency function that we really focused on. I think going forward, though, there are some lessons, and one real lesson which we've fed back to government and the regulator is that this emphasises how important the smart meter rollout is, because what we know with smart customers is you can do a lot more remotely than you can with conventional classic meters. So, for instance, you can put emergency credit on them and things like that. So those were some of the challenges at the beginning. Can people get their keys for their meters charged and all the rest of it? And will they run out of credit? It would be so much easier to manage with smart. So it was never kind of in the cost benefit analysis of smart, but in a situation where you're in lockdown and you've got a global pandemic, it would be better if every customer had a smart meter. And that's just something that we wouldn't have known before. So I think it just reiterates that it's really important. We're driving hard the smart installation, but we want to push it even harder now.
Yeah. John, I'll throw it to you. I mean, Heidi referenced technology, then Michael's talked about the tech and so on. I mean, there's so many elements to this equation, but, where have you seen in particular really strong use of technology during the crisis so far?
I think the first thing I would say is just referencing what other people have said is speed. I guess when you have a burning platform, as we did with the virus, then suddenly things that maybe would have taken 6 months to implement suddenly get implemented in a week. So technology that we've implemented in the last couple of months, and there's a couple of that I'll sort of call out. Firstly, I mean, we had Teams in the business. Was it used in probably the most appropriate way? Probably not, but now it's widely used, and it's doing us a great job. And we're pretty confident in ourselves that if we are reopening in our offices, they are COVID ready, but we're making sure that people that actually need to go into the office are the only people that do go in the office, because we're comfortable that we can run the business remotely. I think the other thing that we did was we were just about to deploy some technology called Field. Field is a technology where it's got sort of things, artificial intelligence, video stuff, some of the stuff that Heidi talked about. And again, we had a sort of 6-month rollout program. And again, and because of the pandemic and because of what we knew it could do, we rolled that out within 2 weeks. So, and now we're using Field, now we're using Teams extensively across the business. So I think the technology has been fantastic. We've done stuff in the last few months that would have taken us a long time to do, and it's been accepted in the business. We have a tendency in the business to maybe be, being a gas distribution business, we like things to be 100% right, but one thing that we've done is that we've started to deploy things like minimal viable product, so it's out there when we fix on fail. So I think technology has been fantastic, and it's enabled us to communicate better with our colleagues, communicate as we're doing today, with external persons, but also it's enabled us to be more productive. I think the other thing, the interesting thing is as a company, we tend to do an awful lot of classroom training, and we train safety stuff, etc., new techniques, and within a month, that all that training is now online, and we've got micro videos that have been set up. So our training team has sort of pivoted massively within 4 weeks from classroom based to technology based, and again, thinking about stuff that we'll take forward. Well, my challenge to anybody in SGN is, why do you need classroom training? It can be done through the internet, or through Teams and through other means. So absolutely. So I think technology has been fantastic, and it's helped us serve our customers and also keep our employees well informed.
Yeah, training, learning, sense. It's come across my desk many times. Many clients are in touch about that stuff, and there are ways of doing it. But Steve, Anaplan knows a thing or two about technology. What have been the innovations that you've seen? You were nodding with on John's points there. Anything that you've seen that's been really exciting during this time?
Lots of things that John said resonate. I mean, we're an enabling technology, and so I guess if you first try and define what innovation for me is new ways of working, new processes, but also a speed element. How can I get to a new world of working quicker? We've honestly never been busier. So actually, a few people have reflected this is sort of the best year they've had. I think a lot of our customers are looking at their traditional ways of planning, which were either cyclical, they're annual, they're quarterly, monthly. Most of the inputs to planning are kind of well known. Suddenly a disruption comes along, and actually you've got to be a lot more agile. And actually a lot of the known knowns are now actually unknown unknowns, and you're trying to think of how the hell do I model that? I'll give you a couple of examples. I think if I picked on two of the biggest areas across, and I'll cluster utilities and telco together, I think workforce planning is probably the area people have switched focus to most quickly, and others have commented about, how do I get people into a customer premise? How do I get them into a residential setting safely? In the instance of someone like BT Openreach, my demand is suddenly spiking. I've got more people wanting to work from home, and all of them want unlimited bandwidth at, of course, a time when we're all consuming tons more bandwidth. But I can't get into that customer's premise to put the equipment I'd need to put a new fibre connection in. So people have been thinking about that, and then also thinking about how connected that world is. Very easy for me to say I'm going to now see more connections, but actually I've got a limited field sales force. How can I repurpose people, as I think Heidi talked about, into new roles by training them quickly? And then how do I make sure my supply chain keeps up with that? If I have to put equipment on site, actually my supply chain also has to react to this. So planning, I think this has really highlighted that planning is a connected activity, whereas in quite a lot of organizations where we start working with, it's quite a siloed activity. So, the field sales force will plan because they know what the demand's been. They can historically look at data. If something that switches, they've got to also switch with their supply chain partners and make sure that actually you can still deliver that service. So a lot in that area. So the other one we've touched on quite a lot, and it was brought up by, I think, a couple of my fellow panelists, was how do I model bad debt? And I think a lot of our customers are looking at what happens over the next 6 months. And I don't think any of us really know exactly how bad that's going to look. You look at sort of the Bank of England and some of the economists talking about different shaped letter recoveries almost every week. We hope it's a V-shaped recovery. But how deep is that, and how many people are going to be affected once things like furlough start to taper off?
Yeah.
And I guess in a utilities context, this need to, look after your customer, look after your vulnerable customers against the requirement to run a business, that's a tough thing. So we've seen a lot of modelling in that space.
Yeah.
I'd say those are the two main areas of innovation we've seen, which are really just new ways of working.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Steve. We will talk just briefly about obstacles and opportunities. I'll come to Heidi in a second, but Basil, you've been waiting there patiently. You've mentioned how, in many ways, how successful this period has been. Surprising, certainly. What about new opportunities? Are there new ways of working? Are there new things that perhaps you hadn't even considered before that now create opportunities?
Yeah, Linda, it's an interesting question. Opportunities out of a disaster, I guess. That's what you're asking. But it's interesting. And some of the guys have already touched on this. Firstly, from a ways of working perspective, we've had 3,000 employees working from home in the last 3 months. Do we need the office space that we've used in the past? Do we need that in the future? Do we need to renew some of the leases that perhaps are expiring of buildings we occupy today? Training facilities that, I dare say, we all have. Are they the way of the future, or can we, as John has already touched on, can we do away with classroom type training? And therefore, I think it creates a whole lot of opportunities from an efficiency perspective. Yeah. But if I look wider from the wider economy, and Heidi touched on this, the fact that there's going to be a focus on costs because there'll be increased unemployment and a lot of disruption in the economy. And the focus on costs, certainly for utility costs, energy costs, water costs, was there before. But I sense that there's a change in the mood, certainly from the regulator, where the focus will always be on cost, but on the green recovery. achieving net zero by 2050, that is coming to the fore more and more. And as we talk about how we're going to recover, what sort of economic recovery are we going to have? I know our regulators are talking to us saying, how can you bring forward expenditure associated with a green recovery? What can we do to facilitate and speed up decarbonisation of transport, decarbonising heat, decarbonising electricity? So that creates opportunities. And then, for example, from a UK Power Networks perspective, we run an unregulated business. The unregulated business provides services to, for example, to airports. We also have 500 odd hospitals in our patch in London and the southeast and east of England. And suddenly we're getting customers coming to us because resilience and the essential services, we're all starting to realise how important essential services are during a period such as we've gone through. And the NHS is clearly a good example, and what a great job they've done. But the regulators, the governments are also starting to understand that whether it's water, gas, electricity, we provide an essential service, and therefore cutting costs and preventing investment might be good in the short term, but when things go wrong, are the networks going to be resilient enough to provide the essential service? Because the cost of not being able to provide an essential service far outweigh the 10 or 20 pounds that might have to go on the electricity or water or gas bill. So I think it's the pandemic has created a whole lot of opportunities, firstly internally in terms of additional efficiency, but importantly externally, where the focus on achieving net zero, the green recovery, etc., has come to the fore.
Well, as always, our time is precious, so I'm going to move us on in a second, and we'll talk about innovation and culture in a second, because so much has come through today about not only the planning aspects. We'll talk about planning, but also about the role that the people in your organisation have to play wherever they are working, and those connections between them are so important. But we'll go into innovation with Heidi in a second. But first of all, I just want to say we're about 13 minutes away from your questions. You're sending them in. We've got some great questions here, so we'll try to rattle through those quickly when our core part of our discussion is done in about 12 minutes, maybe a little bit less. But Heidi, let's talk about innovation culture and how Northumbrian Water's innovation culture has fared, and will that be kind of almost your passport to move forward?
Thanks. Well, I guess some of you will know that one of the things that we have become quite renowned for in the last few years is our innovation festival. So the culture of innovation definitely hasn't gone away during this period. So we were sat thinking, okay, that's a big public gathering, so we're not going to be allowed to have that. But in an unashamed plug, I will say our innovation festival is going ahead between the 14th and the 17th of September, but it's going to happen virtually. And actually, that's got to be a great opportunity, because what we've learned now and already have planned is that we can make that festival global, because people who might have found it difficult to participate in our sprints and hackathons physically with us are now going to participate with us right the way around the world. So just a massive invitation to everybody who's on this broadcast today. If you want to get involved in that and come along and see how we can answer some of those challenges, that's going ahead in virtual. And if we do get any kind of let up in lockdown, there might be a few pop-up things happen where we can come together in person as well. But we are undiminished in our innovation culture and striving. But just to maybe give you an example of how some of the innovations that we've brought in over the last few years have really, really helped during this. So one of the decisions we took was to not stop our capital programme. And so pretty much the whole capital programme has continued, because obviously the work that we do is essential. And if we hadn't continued that, we would have stored up some real problems. But we have been really working really hard on digital twinning, not just in capital programs, but generally. So we've got some big treatment works upgrades that have carried on through this, where the fact that we had a digital twin of what we were doing has really paid off. Because as we've gone through the building process and things have needed to be adjusted or thought about or done differently, where normally all the engineers would have been on site prodding, poking, walking around and scratching their chins, this has been going on virtually, and people have been remodelling. We did quite a major remodelling on one element of one of the treatment works and had enough confidence in that to move forward and actually construct on that basis, and it's worked. Yeah. So, brilliant that these technologies can really support us and that kind of innovation. And innovation, of course, is taking a myriad of different forms. Those are big ones, but just the adaptability and flexibility, and the fact that people are open to ideas and working with other people I can tell you, is alive and well in Northumbrian Water, and we'd be delighted to share it with you in September.
I think people underestimate the value of prodding, poking, and scratching chins in the innovation cycle. I think it's really important.
In terms of virtually now,
not quite as effective, but still useful. Steve, planning within utilities. I mean, we're talking about innovation here. The role of planning is now probably even more important, isn't it? Because we're coming out of this. In some ways, we're coming out of this instant response phase, and now we're looking at the longer term. So, what do you plan for? What do you start to do in terms of putting planning first?
I think if you talk to any of these fellow panelists, they're asking questions of their business, and they want their teams to come to them with rapid answers. If I change X, what's the impact on all the other parts of my business? I think if you look at traditional companies, customers we start working with, that process can be quite hard. Everyone's got a great system of record. We've all done that piece of work. We've got a big ERP. It's implemented. It's working. Michael's going through a transformational change on some of that stuff. But typically it's getting data out of that. There's then this middle office, which I think Accenture talk about, the messy middle. But we can all nod and say that world is occupied by Excel, just tons of Excel, where we pull things together from our system of record, do analytics on it to try and inform us of how we build our plan. And it's that bit that's kind of ungoverned. It's kind of very manual. It's kind of harder to do when you're all remote. That's the bit where we see people focusing on, and that's really the piece that Anaplan plugs in on top of. So we see that's where most of our focus is. Whatever the use case, whether it's a workforce planning use case, a bad debt use case, another financial, capital investment use case, it's how do I get data from my system of record into an agile platform where people can collaborate on it to form a plan that has options, that give me options as a decision maker in my business of what I do next.
Yeah.
And I think, you look at, I'll use BT as an example again. BT changed that cycle time from about 3 months down to about 4 weeks, and 4 people in one area of their business down to 1 person. Now of course, there's a nice little cost saving to have there, but it's not really about the cost saving. It's the time element and the speed I can get to a new plan and feel confident that plan's built on solid foundations. So I think that's what we're seeing, and we're seeing it across other industries as well. Financial industry is just as impacted by some of these changes. So
yeah, absolutely. I'm hearing those stories too. There are so many common factors across industries, across sectors, and the conversation we're having today is echoed across so many places at the moment, and the points of infrastructure as well that Basil was talking about are also echoed. Michael, I'll ask you about lasting effects as you see them in a second. But John, while we're talking about transformation, how have timelines, do you think, been impacted? I mean, in some ways, I think we can all say it's been accelerated. But what do you think about digital transformation right now?
Well, I think as far as digital transformation is concerned, I mean, one thing that has happened, as I said, because I mean, we did have a lot of paper-based processes in the business, and actually, because we're all now remote, we've had to super fast digitize some processes that weren't. So the sort of techniques I talked about earlier, field, which is that application that we've got, all the internet learning, etc. That is being digitized as we speak, because it has to be. So that transformation is taking place. I think the other thing I would say, which is slightly outside the digital transformation bit, is that one thing we saw because of COVID was suddenly the barriers in the organization broke down completely. And, I talked about collaboration between external parties, but there was massive collaboration internally. And actually, one of the things that I want to take forward is that sense of collaboration between the different departments in the organization, because actually, when we work together and when any team work together, you're going to get far, far more done. So, whether it's digital transformation or just general transformation in the business, the learning from COVID for myself is, let's break down the barriers as COVID has, and let's keep them broken down. And then let's use that structure that we put in place to deal with COVID to drive other things forward in the organisation, including digital.
I'm going to take that from you now, John, and throw it around, because we've got a few minutes left before audience questions. And Michael, that must be one of those collaborating within, but also outside the organisation. Collaboration must be one of those things that we'll take forward.
Absolutely, and I think this whole question of digitization is key, and in fact it's the direction we'd already been going down. I mentioned that we'd done a deal with Kraken Technologies to move on to a different platform for our customers, and this was directionally where we were going. And actually we saw COVID really drove a change in customers' behavior and a move towards more digital channels and away from voice channels. We expect to see that continue. That's one of the enduring traits. There's going to be changes also in how customers use energy and patterns of usage, as well as changes in their interaction with the system. And I think the whole question of investment in zero carbon, again, is something we've been preparing for, and we see ourselves in future not as a supplier of energy, but as a partner for our customers in their own journey to get to zero carbon. And we have set up our organization to deliver that. And so I think some of the things that COVID has highlighted, the importance of smart, the importance of digital, the importance of driving to zero carbon to help the recovery, all of those things exactly play in directionally to where we were going. And we're prepared now to help support that and drive it forward.
Basil, collaboration. There are great opportunities here. There's a lot better ways of working if, as you were saying earlier on, you put expertise at top, infrastructure second.
And a lot of the points have already been covered in terms of internal type collaboration, breaking down the silos that invariably exist in our organisations. They've all been broken down, but importantly, the collaboration externally. Firstly, for example, with the unions, we brought the union reps in our senior management meeting on a daily basis, and their help and collaboration to make sure that the employees and their union members, in effect, changed very quickly has been unbelievable. The collaboration between the industry, for example, the CEOs of gas and electricity, over the last 3 or 4 months have met sometimes twice a week, have met with the regulator every week, not just in planning as how we're going to respond to the pandemic, but over the last few weeks, how we're actually going to catch up the backlog. And so far, we haven't heard any complaints that I'm aware, at least, from either gas, electricity, and I dare say water, in terms of being too slow to catch up the backlog. And so collaboration internally, externally, I think it's important that those opportunities are retained for the future and not forgotten about.
We'll move on to audience questions in a second, but Steve, I'll let you finish off on this one. In some ways, digital transformation and collaboration or communication go hand in hand, don't they, in many ways? You can think of them as, in some ways, the same thing.
I think I concur with what other people have said. This virus has been actually a catalyst for people embracing greater collaboration, I'm sure all of our utilities have seen people move to digital channels probably faster. It's probably had a really good impact on that. I know before COVID, lots of bigger customers were looking at, cost transformation, especially the more traditional players, because they had the customers that were less profitable, maybe less desirable to have from a purely financial perspective. I think some of that marketplace is changing. I know we work pretty closely with EDF on some of that modelling. But as I think Basil said, let's just hope we retain that muscle memory. We've had 3 months practice now how we do things kind of quicker and in a more connected way.
Yeah.
If we've all seen the benefits of that, let's hope we can retain that going forward as we come out of COVID.
Thanks very much, everybody, so far. Okay, we've got 5 minutes or so to go through lots of audience questions. Let's give this a good go. There are a couple on price cuts, first of all, and I just want to very quickly reference that. One question here, how does the expected debt that we're likely to face pair with Ofgem's price cuts? Now, I know it's a difficult subject to talk about, but can I just throw it to somebody there who's got their hands up, who wouldn't mind just talking about price cuts and where it takes us?
Shall I jump in?
Please do, Michael. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, clearly, the price cap is up for review now by Ofgem. It's periodically reviewed for standard variable tariff customers. Ofgem will take into account all of the costs of the industry. I think, as far as debt is concerned at the moment, it's too early for them to factor that in.
Yeah.
But what we should see over time is Ofgem looking at the cost base, seeing how it's changed, and then factoring it into future price caps. So I think the question was price cuts. Well, price cap is actually the right view.
Yes.
Now, because wholesale prices are falling, it is moving in that direction. But of course, over time, it needs to recover all of the industry costs. So Ofgem will run the numbers and they'll make suitable calculations based on what the evidence says.
I'm very well aware that every one of these questions could last us another hour, but we don't have that time, sadly. Okay, questions here. There is a question which I really like. There are questions about the Chancellor's announcements yesterday on energy efficiency. But again, we have to keep on going. There is a question here about the importance of, they're moving around quite a lot, about the, okay, yes. How important is risk management going to be with respect to not just general enterprise risk, but also utilities specific business and operational risks? Look, risk is going to plan, Heidi, just to you for a minute, to plan, to assess risks accurately, which are changing. How important is risk management, do you think, going to be?
Well, I think I would say that our industries are actually very skilled at risk management already. But I think the thing that this is going to bring probably more to the fore, and it's just not the risks that we manage, because I think, we have proven ourselves, haven't we, to be highly flexible, highly resilient, and adaptable. And I think, that's to everybody's credit. But I think this whole pandemic has shone a light on the critical infrastructure in the country and just how much we are depending on it. We're talking here today about utilities, but clearly we've talked an awful lot about the health infrastructure in the country as well. And so I think government's now got some deep thought about what it needs to do to really think through how to get that resilience right. And perhaps the balance for a number of years has been weighed heavily in the sort of let's try and keep bills down, efficiency. And of course, everybody recognises that's important and we need to make sure that we're value for money. But have we got that value balance right? And that's, some of you will know that we're currently challenging our regulatory review just to ask some of those questions about where is the balance between resilience and cost, because we want to make sure, and, I think everybody wants to make sure there are other resets coming along behind this, that we've got the right balance. So customers, do get great value for money, but we don't find ourselves left high and dry, literally with water, when things like this put us under pressure in the future. So
Heidi,
I think
thanks.
Big question to answer on that.
So sort of jumping out all the time. We have so many questions. There are questions about debt collections and do utility firms have the right tools in place to make sure that time and money isn't wasted on tracing debtors. We do talk about vulnerable customers. There are so many things that are changing. Essentially, the customer experience and how you deal with customers is going to be a real pressure. But we can't answer that right now, sadly. There's a question about job losses. I only can ask one more question, and it's a really, really good question. How much of a role will utilities play in rebuilding the economy? Basil, in very brief terms, how important do you think utilities will be?
I think, as I said it earlier on, I think it's going to be vital infrastructure. And we've heard the Prime Minister talking about build, build, build. The Treasurer yesterday talked about the green recovery, achieving net zero by 2050. That's not going to be achieved unless utilities, electricity, gas especially, continue to build infrastructure which is fit for purpose. So in short, the utilities' contribution to the recovery is going to be enormous.
John, then Steve. John, similar question, really. How important is it to get utilities right? We know how important it's been throughout the pandemic because we're all here at home. But what do you think the importance will be going forward?
Well, I just need to echo what Basil has said. I think the two things I would say is that until something's not there, you don't know you're going to miss it. And, the resilience of the utilities is, in my view, paramount on the basis that if it's not there, it can cost a lot more than, as Basil says, a few quid off the bill.
Absolutely.
And we've got to keep trying to get more efficient, absolutely, and we've got to be investing in the right things, absolutely. But we need to make sure that the investment is there to keep the lights on, the gas flow and the water flow. And I think, just to build on Basil's comment about the green recovery, I mean, absolutely, I think what we can do as utilities is make sure that when we invest, it's fit for the future. So I mean, my interest is in hydrogen, as Basil knows, and we are really, really keen to start building out hydrogen infrastructure. And that's something that, I'll be talking and am talking to government, both UK and Scottish government, about on a regular basis. So I think, the electrification of heat, the putting hydrogen and heat, it's all something that should happen. It will create jobs and it will get us to net zero. So I think the utilities, we need to stay resilient, but also we need to invest for the future.
Very good. And Steve, very, very quickly, these are all extremely good points. And I guess John's point there begs the question, when can we go from beyond, operations as we've been doing right now, keeping the taps running, keeping the energy flowing, and into those innovation ideas and the way that we should be in the future? It's a tough question. What do we do next?
Just talking as a consumer, I mean, one of the things that I think is a really positive outcome of COVID is the airtime that the green and carbon neutral agendas got, and I just hope government are good to their word, and that's where they invest heavily and create new jobs and new opportunities. Many of our customers are using Anaplan to build their net neutral, carbon neutral plans. I hope we can see acceleration in that area. But because I think that will give each of the panelists here the opportunity to differentiate their services. And I think the quicker we can move from a sort of race to the bottom on price. I know when I changed my utility provider a couple of years ago, actually carbon neutral was really important to me, and digital channel was really important. And I hope more of that comes to the forefront as we move forward from here.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid that's all we have time for the discussion. Thanks very much to our amazing panelists. We could have talked for hours longer. And of course, everyone who submitted a question. Sorry we couldn't get to them all, but that was really fascinating and really a survey, a review of the entire industry as we see it at the moment.